Now I would like to introduce our featured speaker, Melissa Klembara, the U.S. Department of Energy's Acting Deputy Director for Portfolio Strategy in the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. Established under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill signed into law last year, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations will help move clean energy technologies out of the lab and into local and regional economies across the country, proving the value of technologies that can deliver for communities, businesses, and markets. The office has a goal of hiring the best and brightest talent to invest in cutting-edge clean energy projects, including clean hydrogen, carbon capture, grid-scale energy storage, small modular reactors, and more. And with that, Melissa, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to be here. I'm really excited to talk to you about this new mystery office that just got started at the U.S. Department of Energy, the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, and kind of all the amazing work that we hope to do over the next 5, 10, 15 years, but especially what we've gotten funding for in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So I want to talk to you about that a little bit more. So I'll go into a little bit of background about me in case you've never met me before, kind of my background at DOE, the mission and focus of OCED, and a little bit more detail on the funding that we have currently through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then kind of a little bit of a look ahead of what we hope to build out in our base level funding in order to achieve these aggressive goals for decarbonizing our grid and the economy. I'll give you a little bit of a flavor of the current status of our office. And I love that you mentioned staffing up, because hiring is very important. Right now, we are about 20 people in this new office that we hope to be about 275 to 300 people. And the secretary announced a Clean Energy Corps portal for folks to submit their resumes to join the Department of Energy. And so, any references that you have or referrals that you have of talented people that want to get into this area, I'd love to chat about to folks about that later. I think also how we would work more with TAEBC in the future. I come from the Advanced Manufacturing Office, which runs the lab embedded entrepreneurial programs like Innovation Crossroads at Oak Ridge National Lab. So I love that we already have that hook with you already. But going forward, I'd love to figure out how we can develop the relationship between the and OCED going forward. Okay, so first I'll start off with a little bit about who I am. My background is actually chemical engineering. I've been at the Department of Energy for about 20 years now. Prior to that, I actually lived in the state of Tennessee, Memphis, for 3 years while I worked at International Paper Company as a process engineer. So I'm a former Tennessean. And I've been at DOE mostly in the energy efficiency and renewable energy offices. So I started off in the bioenergy technology office, working on piloting, demonstrating, and commercializing biorefinery technologies. So I have a bit of a background in, the challenges and the multiple valleys of death in scaling up technologies kind of from the lab or bench scale to try to get them out to the commercial scale and try to unlock that private sector capital formation and financing for bankable projects. It's a real challenge, and that is the space that OCED plays in that I'll talk more about. But most of my experience at the Department of Energy was in scaling up these new technologies. I also served as a chief of staff for Kathleen Hogan, who is our new undersecretary for all of the infrastructure work that these new offices that were announced a few weeks ago, one of which is OCED. And I also was a chief of staff both on the energy efficiency side and renewable power side. So I have a kind of a broad array of understanding of the energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies that are important to get us onto these pathways for decarbonization. And then most recently, before joining OCED, I worked in the Advanced Manufacturing Office, leading up Manufacturing USA Institute. called Rapid, which is led by the American Institute of Chemical Engineers that focused on process intensification. And I also headed up a energy water desalination hub, which Oak Ridge National Lab was part of, as well as a consortia on plastics upcycling, which Oak Ridge is also a part of. That's a little bit about me right now. My current role is as the acting deputy director for portfolio strategy in this new Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, where we're trying to figure out, we have all of this amazing funding, $20 billion worth of funding across a number of energy technology areas, funded through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But we need a multi-year strategy for how we're going to achieve these very aggressive goals for decarbonization of our grid and decarbonization of the economy by 2050. So part of what my role is to come up with that, multi-year program planning and prioritization of what types of investments in a broad array of technology pathways that will get us there, and the level of investments that we need over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years in order to achieve those goals. The other kind of area that I'm focused on as part of my role is sort of our risk posture plan. So right now we sit in between sort of the applied R&D offices at the Department of Energy and the loan programs office. And the loan programs office is very risk averse. And so we're going to be taking on than the loan program office. But we also have the applied R&D offices that take a lot of risks. And, I guess they play in a space that they can afford to take those risks because they're smaller projects. And if they don't work out for whatever reason, it doesn't end up on the front page of the news. And so where we play in OCED is moving things from lab, bench, integrated pilot scale, all the way to kind of that bankable loan, either from the private sector or for loan guarantee. So it's a very, there's a lot of risk in that space. There's multiple valleys of death. And one thing we're trying to develop is, what is our risk posture plan for the portfolio investments that we'll be making across a broad array of technologies, and how do we want to manage those risks as we're managing these projects, and to kind of communicate with the private sector, industry, national labs, universities, the expectation for what type of due diligence reviews we're going to be doing on projects, and the phasing of projects as we get them to demonstrate and kind of construct and operate all these different technologies at scale. So the mission of our office, which I'm trying to describe here, is that we really are filling this important gap between applied R&D and the loan programs office. And we're going to be taking a lot more risks in that. And our goals are ultimately to unlock that private sector capital. So every dollar that we invest in a demonstration scale project, we hope can have that follow-on or knock-on effect of unlocking private sector capital, so that you can, have a bankable business model from demonstrating this technology. The technologies that we currently cover that are covered in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we'll be expanding on, hopefully over the next 5, 10, 15 years, cover a number of areas such as energy storage, long duration energy storage, advanced nuclear reactors, hydrogen, the hydrogen hubs, which is a large portion of the funding, $8 billion, is these large regional hydrogen hubs. We also have funding for carbon capture pilots and demonstrations, and development of clean energy technologies in rural and remote communities, as well as on current and former mine lands. And then we have some funding for grid resiliency upgrades and modernization. So this is a very diverse set of technologies, and it certainly doesn't cover all the different demonstrations that we need to do to achieve net zero carbon on the grid by 2035. and net zero carbon economy by 2050 that this administration has set. Currently what we're doing right now is, because as I mentioned, we're a small growing program, is we're trying to hire a significant number of staff that have experience in these technologies, as well as large demonstration scale projects. As you might know, DOE has a bit of a checkered past here in scaling up new technology. And so we want to learn from those lessons of carbon capture projects, the biorefinery projects, offshore wind projects, a variety of other projects that we've done. And how can OCED become a center of excellence for scaling up new technologies in having good project management oversight practices? And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is as we develop programs for long duration energy storage or the hydrogen hubs, is have a consistent approach to project management and oversight, and set clear expectations to those who might be applying, what they might need to put in their applications, the type of due diligence reviews that we'll be doing, the type of phased projects and clear kind of milestones that need to be achieved during each phase of the project in order to move into the next budget period and get the next amount of funding and scope approved, so that we're all sort of on the same page about expectations for how we're going to vet projects and pass them through sort of stage gates or go, no-go decision points. Because we know that these are risky technologies. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be taking on and loan programs office. So we need to be able to have sort of that strong project management oversight to make those down selects or go no goes as the technologies pass through each phase. So in addition to sort of coming up with some kind of standard operating procedures for how we are going to manage these projects and become kind of this center of excellence, we're working across the applied R&D offices and the loan programs office to design how we're going to execute on the funding for these different programs, whether it's long duration energy storage or in the hydrogen hubs, or in other areas that I listed out earlier. We're working with cross-functional teams across the Department of Energy that are subject matter experts to help design some of the funding opportunity announcements that will be released hopefully later this summer or fall. A lot of the activities that you'll be seeing will be posted on our bipartisan infrastructure bill webpage, which I can drop in the chat later. The activities where we will be engaging with a lot of stakeholders will be through workshops that will be upcoming, or requests for information, which you may already have seen released by various programs. Those engagements between workshops, RFIs, or one-on-one discussions that you can have with OCED or some of these programs, those are really helping to shape and inform the design and the concepts for these programs, and what type of, what is really the current state of technology, what type of due diligence reviews do we need to be doing, what is the size of the projects, dollar amount for cost sharing, that you as investors in industry, university, national labs, or in the private sector, that you have already been thinking about forming teams and concepts to propose around the hydrogen hubs or energy storage or in these other areas. And so we really value your input to these requests for information to help us shape the focus of these funding opportunities or other types of mechanisms that we might go out with to really catalyze a lot of the demonstration and deployment activities for these technologies. So, ultimately, what I was saying before is the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations really wants to have that market pull. And so we really want to be having these stakeholder engagements with the private sector to understand what you need from us and how we need to be designing these programs to de-risk the technology, prove out some of these business models, and unlock, that private sector capital. One of the things that we'll be embarking on over the next year as well in this new Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations is in your program plan is developing an understanding of those commercialization pathways for some of these specific technologies like carbon capture, energy storage, hydrogen. So we'll most likely be reaching out to you all to provide some insights into what do some of those business models or projects that you're working on look like for carbon capture or for energy, long duration energy storage or for hydrogen, so that we can really set a clear understanding of the challenges involved to commercializing these specific technologies, what the private sector, sort of that more of that market pull rather than technology push of what DOE needs to be focused on as we make these investments over the next 5, 10, 15 years, especially with this infrastructure bill funding, so that we are aligned with the private sector on the direction that we need to go with deploying and demonstrating these technologies is that you hope the government addresses in partnership with you through these investments. Okay, and so the last thing that I'll touch on is, the future of OCED over the next year, just to clarify, is, we're going to be releasing a number of funding opportunities through these bill provisions. We really want to engage with you through these RFIs and stakeholder workshops. We are also open for one-on-one discussions, so please reach out to me if you'd like to set up meetings with OCD, Loan Programs Office, or other offices to discuss sort of how you've been thinking about some of these clean energy and decarbonization challenges and what you hope the Department of Energy considers in the future investments in these technologies, and how we should be partnering with specifically Tennessee and a lot of the great work that you've been doing through this council. I'm really excited to learn more about, the clean tech accelerator programs that you have and these energy, innovation clusters that sounds like you're working with on. So I see a lot of opportunities for our new Office of Clean Energy Demonstration to partner with you to both get your input on how we shape these programs, but also some of these other kind of complementary activities supporting kind of clean tech accelerators and entrepreneurs to get them well positioned to demonstrate their technologies at scale through OCED. So with that, I'm going to pause there and open it up for any questions.
Melissa, thank you so much. That was incredibly informative, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch. And hopefully, I'll have the opportunity to visit with you in person in May. We've got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, what is a typical scale, dollars and throughput of a demonstration project?
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, it definitely varies. Like as an example, we have $8 billion for the hydrogen hubs, and these are meant to be, regional systems of producing hydrogen at scale and its use in different application spaces. And I think they're looking to fund some of the hydrogen hub concepts that we've seen could be up to $1 billion project. I mean, they're big. Whereas we have funding for the energy storage, long duration energy storage, and some of those projects might be more in the tens of millions because they're looking to do pilots before demonstrations or kind of more test bed kind of demonstrations. And so it really depends on the technology that we're talking about. We also have advanced nuclear reactor projects that are about, they're close to $500 million. And so it really depends on the technology and the scale. We're looking to do pilots and demos, but that's kind of what we are trying to reach out to the community to get feedback through these workshops and through the RFIs is, you tell us what hopefully about what the size of these projects should be for each of the technologies and what cost share you think is reasonable. I mean, 50 cost share, but what does that cost share look like for your needs?
Great. And let's see, another question we have is what form will DOE's funding take? Grants, loans, licenses, etc.
Right. So we're not a loan guarantee or a loan programs office. So we have the loan programs office that's separate. Most of our work will be through what we call, which is how we do most of the work within the applied R&D offices. We are looking at, and I think some of these requests for information and workshops in the various technologies will be trying to get input from our stakeholders on this, looking at what's called other transactional authorities. And so are there other, we could do prizes, we could do contract for differences, we could do technology investment agreements. There's a number of what they call other transactional authorities that we know, like NASA or DoD has used. And so we're looking to understand, in addition to sort of the typical way that we do funding opportunity announcements and cooperative agreements, where DOE is substantially involved in the project management oversight, are there other kind of these creative financing mechanisms that we should be thinking about to kind of balance out our investments and really incentivize the markets? And so we'd really love to hear more from you about like what else we should be thinking about with some of these tools in our toolbox, like other transactional authorities.
Great. And Melissa, I think we've had some members participate in some of those roundtable and stakeholder meetings through the National Venture Capital Association. I know they've organized a couple of roundtables and we've had some members participate in those. So we are happy to continue partnering with you guys. So we will absolutely stay in touch. One last question we have is, does OCED have a website? And I think the answer is it is forthcoming, but you were going to share another link in our chat.
We do. I'll share the link to our website. It's actually really hard to find because I Googled it last night and you have to it doesn't immediately show up. So I'll put the OCED website in the chat, as well as they will be put for, OCD is $20 billion of, I think, the $62 billion funding for DOE. And so they did establish kind of a landing page for all the bill provisions, including the demonstration and deployment work, which is a lot of it is OCD, but also there's a lot of complementary R&D activities going on. And so I'll drop a link to that landing page because they should be posting, RFIs, workshops, notices of intent, and or other type of funding mechanism releases on that landing page as well.
Great. Well, Melissa Klembara, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to our continued partnership. And thank you so much for sharing all those insights with our membership.
Yeah, thank you for having me.